morning, Cedar Park. I'm Gus Mtjoy, and this is my March Madness Final Four preview. 68 tournament games have built up to this. 4 teams, the Final Four, playing for the ultimate prize of college basketball. And while some may have said this March Madness was a little underwhelming with the lack of upsets, leading to 4 teams, all 4 of the Final Four teams were 1 seeds, the first time since 2008. Our first team we're going over is the Auburn Tigers out of the SEC. They went 32-5 during the regular season, were first in the regular season, claiming the SEC regular season title, and they lost in the semis of the SEC tourney playing Tennessee. So now, as they made it to the Final Four, they'll play Florida. So far this year, they've had the most Q1 wins. They're 4th in the KenPom rankings, and they're the #1 overall seed in the tournament. And to get to this point, they've had to beat 16-seed Alabama State, 9-seed Creighton, 5-seed Michigan, and the 2-seed Michigan State Spartans. Our first player to watch is Johnny Broome, National Player of the Year finalist. He's averaging 18.7 points per game and 10 rebounds. He had 25, 14, and 22 against the Michigan State Spartans in the Elite 8. And he's paired with Chad Baker-Mazara, 12, 3, and 2 across the year, and had 17 against Creighton in the round of 32. And they'll be playing Florida. During the regular season, they lost at home by 9. And now, our second team, the Florida Gators. They went 34-4 and were 2nd in the SEC regular season. And they won the SEC tournament after beating Tennessee, who beat Auburn. And now they're obviously playing Auburn. They went 14-4 against Quad 1. They're 3rd in the KenPom rankings. And to get to this point, they beat Norfolk State, UConn, Maryland, and Texas Tech. They're led by their star guard, Walter Clayton Jr., who's a Bob Cousy Award finalist for the best point guard of the season. He had 18 points per game and 4 assists per game, and had 30 against Texas Tech in the Elite 8, including 2 clutch threes to send the Gators to the Final Four. Our next team, our third, is now we go up to the other matchup, the Duke Blue Devils, 35-3, first in the ACC regular season, and won the ACC tournament. They're the #1 overall offense in all of college basketball, and they're playing Houston. So far this year, they are first in the final AP poll rankings, and 1st in KenPom rankings. And to get to this point, they beat Mount St. Mary's, Baylor, Arizona, and Alabama. Their first player to watch out for, Cooper Flagg, National Player of the Year finalist and the favorite. He's the projected #1 pick in the NBA draft, and so far this year he's averaging 19 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, and 4 assists per game. He's joined by Tyrese Proctor, 12 points per game, who's been shooting 41% from deep this season. And they'll be clashing against the Houston Cougars, 34-4, first in the Big 12 regular season, and they won the Big 12 tourney. They're the #1 overall defense playing Duke, which will be very interesting to see how the #1 defense plays the #1 offense. They're 2nd in KenPom, 2nd in the final AP poll, and they beat SIUE, Gonzaga, Purdue, and Tennessee to get to the Final Four. They're led by LJ Cryer, 15 points per game, 40% from the field, and he dropped 17 in a dominant win for the Cougars against Tennessee in the Elite 8. Here's my 2 predictions for these matchups. In Florida versus Auburn, really, really studded game. So much NBA talent. It's just a heavyweight matchup from the SEC. If I had to choose, I'd say Florida right now. I think Florida's probably the hottest team in college basketball, besides probably the other 2 teams. I think just the composure they've shown. Auburn's played a couple close games, so has Florida though. Florida had to come back to beat Texas Tech in the Elite 8. But I love Walter Clayton Jr. is a very good basketball player. He is a very good game, and I think that's going to transition really well against Auburn defense. Who obviously they dominated Michigan State, but it was never that big of a gap. Michigan State were always hanging around, but I still think Auburn will be able to put up a good fight. But the game I'm really excited for, Duke-Houston. Duke, the #1 offense, versus Houston, the #1 defense. Duke led by Cooper Flagg versus Houston led by LJ Cryer. #1 offense versus #1 defense seem to be interesting games because they always seem to go the way you don't expect. A lot of the times they end up in blowouts, but this one I think is just, how is Houston going to be able to contain Cooper Flagg? And are they? Because Cooper Flagg, obviously, he's a freshman, and he's already the projected #1 overall pick. He's just super versatile. He can play really good defense. He can play in the paint. He can shoot from deep. Super talented. On it though, I love Houston. I think Houston is going to win because they've played a harder schedule. The ACC was not as difficult as the Big 12 was this year. The Big 12 was a very underrated conference with teams like Arizona, Texas Tech, Baylor was good. They won a tournament game, and more. So I think I'd have to give the nudge to Houston if I had to choose. which means I have Florida versus Houston in my national championship.